Hello. Our nation and indeed the world right now is going through a very trying time of fear and uncertainty. And our staff here at Watchman Fellowship, we talked about a way that we could give a message right now of hope and encouragement. The truth of the matter is God is still on His throne. He's sovereign, and God is still a God of miracles. We recently interviewed Duane Miller. Pastor Miller was the recipient of a miracle. In fact, we think this is a miracle that may have been caught on tape. Brady Blevins, our senior researcher here at Watchman, interviewed Duane, and I'd like to take you to that in just a moment. This is one of our upcoming podcasts called Apologetics Profile, and we're really kind of rushing the launch of this forward today to be able to share this message with you. Now, most of our podcasts are going to be audio only, but this one and several others we're going to be recording as well on video. And so I'm going to take you there, but there's a couple of things I'd like you to do. First of all, please give me some feedback. Email me back or contact us here at Watchman and let us know, what did you think of this podcast, Do Miracles Happen? And secondly, I want you to subscribe. In the comments below, there's a link where you can subscribe on Apple Podcast or Google Podcast, Spotify, other places. And we already have 2 other podcasts ready to go for you. And then this Monday morning and every Monday morning afterwards, we'll have a brand new, fresh podcast ready to go for you. So one way we can minister to you here at Watchman Fellowship. So let me take you now to Brady Blevins interviewing Pastor Duane Miller.
And the pressure was like someone had a hand on my throat and was squeezing on my vocal cords. That's how it felt.
Wow.
And that's what was there for 3 years. I could not swallow without feeling choked. I could not speak without feeling that hand. It was like someone just had a hand on my throat. It wasn't like I was going to die, but I could not draw a free breath. That's the only way I know to express it.
Wow.
The only thought that I can remember that afternoon was, let's get the 12 gauge and get this over with. And I did. Got the 12 gauge and put it between my legs on the floor, put the barrel in my mouth. And I sat there, and I have been asked 1,000 times, why didn't you pull the trigger? Mm-hmm. And the answer is, I have no idea. I barely remember those 4 hours. I don't know why. I attribute it to grace of God. That's all I know.
This is Apologetics Profile, a podcast from Watchman Fellowship, giving you the tools to defend your faith with confidence. Here's your host, Senior Apologist Brady Blevins.
Hi, I'm Brady Blevins, Senior Apologist with Watchman Fellowship, and the question today is, are miracles possible? And I have a very special guest with me today, Duane Miller. Duane, let me ask you this. First of all, thank you for taking this time to sit down with me.
You're welcome.
But now let me ask you this. Are miracles possible?
Well, let me put it this way. I've experienced one.
Wow. Well, tell me more about that.
Miracles for me, Brady, it's a subject that is very controversial. I don't like sensationalism, and yet I don't limit the power of God to be God. I guess I would say it this way. I'd like at times to put God in a box and tell him to behave himself, and he's just not going to do that. He's going to be God. I'm not. I had lost my voice to a virus, and for 3 years I was told I would not be able to do what I'm doing with you right now. I saw over 200 specialists from all over the world. They all arrived at the same conclusion. The nerve damage to my vocal cords was so extensive that there would be no recovery. And as you can hear, I'm speaking very clearly. Doctors had told me there was no hope, there was no place to go. I was not praying in any particular manner. Have always believed in God, always believed he was sovereign, always believed he could do anything he wanted to do. But in 3 years of speaking like this, you get to a point of saying, probably won't happen for me.
Wow.
And that's okay. God and I had settled that, and I was all right with it. But I was teaching a Sunday school class wearing a special headset microphone I'd gotten from a country singer named Garth something or other. And bless his heart, he was kind enough to send me the headset
Wow.
That he used when he heard about my plight. And I had the headset literally on my lips, and I was screaming at it, trying to read the 103rd Psalm to a Sunday school class of about 400 people. And in the middle of a word, the pressure that had been in my throat for 3 years was gone, and my voice was restored. Wow. So do I believe in miracles? Absolutely.
That's amazing. So you could actually physically feel it when you hit that word. You felt the pressure release on your throat.
For 3 years, the feeling that had been in my throat, Brady. Let me back up just a tad. I had contracted a flu virus, and the flu virus had been just rampant, and it had been the worst flu I'd ever had in my life. And when it was over, put that word in quotes, it left me with pressure. And the pressure was like someone had a hand on my throat and was squeezing on my vocal cords. That's how it felt.
Wow.
And that's what was there for 3 years. I could not swallow without feeling choked. I could not speak without feeling that hand. It was like someone just had a hand on my throat. It wasn't like I was going to die, but I could not draw a free breath. That's the only way I know to express it.
Wow.
And did I feel it? Yes. In the middle of the word, I'd started to say I was going to talk about the pit. And in the middle of the word pit, that pressure was just gone. It was there as I started the word, and it was gone when I finished the word. And that's a one-syllable, three-letter word.
Yeah.
So it didn't take long. And it was just gone. And it startled me.
So the psalmist says, I'm excited. Bless the Lord, O my soul. One of his benefits is he heals all of my diseases. And in verse 4 he says, and he redeems my life from the pit. Now I like that verse just a whole lot.
I hadn't expected that, and that's not a lack of faith. That's just a reality check. I was reading Scripture, and I was commenting on the fact that in that 103rd Psalm, God said he heals all of my disease. I know what the Hebrew says there. I've been to seminary. I understand the theology. I know all about that. But I was saying to the Sunday school class, I believe God's still God, and I believe God heals. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I can't define it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was saying to my class. I believe God still heals. The thought in my mind at that moment was, why not me?
Yeah.
What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And then the next phrase in that 103rd Psalm is, he redeems my life from the pit, the grave, destruction. Mm-hmm. So I started to comment on that. Well, 2 days before that Sunday school class, I had been sitting in a chair in my living room with a shotgun in my mouth.
Wow.
I had reached the end of the line. I was so totally discouraged with everything. And I just told God, I can't take it anymore. I don't want to be here. And the only thought that I can remember that afternoon was, let's get the 12 gauge and get this over with. And I did. Got the 12 gauge and put it between my legs on the floor, put the barrel in my mouth. And I sat there, and I have been asked 1,000 times, why didn't you pull the trigger? Mm-hmm. And the answer is, I have no idea. I barely remember those 4 hours. I don't know why. I attribute it to grace of God. That's all I know. Wow. Because that was the thought that was in my head. I'd come to the end of it. So it wasn't, when I started to talk about the pit, in that 103rd Psalm, he redeems my life from the pit, the grave, destruction. He had done it 2 days before. But that wasn't what was necessarily on my mind. This was not a theological sermon that I had put together. This was a Sunday school class that was being taught. That curriculum was being taught in every Southern Baptist Sunday school across the entire convention.
Oh, wow. So this wasn't like a message that you had specially put together for this church.
Not at all. Not in any way. This was whatever Southern Baptist Church used that curriculum on that day. They were teaching that lesson from that 103rd Psalm.
Wow.
And yeah, that's God. That's called sovereignty. That's what that is. And there are so many things, Brady, that lined up in this experience, if you will. There's no way that anybody could have manipulated all that. You couldn't move all the pieces that needed to be there. It just couldn't happen. That Sunday school class, this particular event had been got recorded that morning. Well, they'd been recording Sunday school lessons for 25 years because they're a class of 300 or 400 or 500, and you never get everybody there.
Yeah.
So they would make a couple of copies of a cassette, and they'd throw it in a basket on the back table. And if the next Sunday you came and you'd missed the previous, you picked up the cassette, you took it home that week, and you listened to it, and you came back the next Sunday and you threw it in the basket beside it that said, "I've heard this," and then they'd use those tapes. The following week. It was nothing. I mean, it was a no big deal. Except in that church of 24,000, that was the only class that recorded lessons.
Wow.
So if I had been anyplace else, wouldn't have been caught on tape. Wow. But that class recording was no big deal. It would have been recorded no matter who taught the class.
So were you on staff at this church?
Yeah, well, I had been. Mm-hmm. At this point, my voice was gone. I didn't do anything. Literally everything I have ever done to earn a living has been connected to my ability to communicate.
Wow.
And suddenly my toolbox was gone. And I couldn't preach. I had to resign a pastorate. I couldn't even call my kids. I have 2 girls. They were students at Baylor. I could not call the girls' dorm because I sounded like an obscene phone caller.
Oh, wow.
And so somebody else had to call them for me, get them on the phone, and then I could croak out a conversation with them. Wow. So it affected all kinds of things, and that's why I had reached the end of the line. So that morning, when I said to the Sunday school class, I began to comment on that verse in Psalm 103, and I said, "You have had, and I have had in times past, pit experiences." Mm-hmm. And it was on that word pit that God stepped in, and I stopped.
I have had, and you have had in times past, pit experiences. We've all had times when our life seemed to be in a pit, in a grave. And we didn't have an answer for the pit we find ourselves in. And I don't understand this right now.
And I swallowed. And there's a recording. Mm-hmm. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear me swallow. That's the first time I had swallowed in 3 years without feeling choked.
Wow.
And I'll give you my first thought. This is not particularly theological. First thought was, is that what I think it is?
Wow.
Because when you've been told by the best medical minds in the world that you'll never hear, feel those vibrations again, and suddenly they're there, is that what I think it is? And I said a few more words, and I paused again, and you can hear, if you're listening carefully, it begin to dawn on me. Yeah, that is what I think it is.
Yeah.
And at that point, I lost it. I am told from listening to the recording, I believe it, that I finished the class and I finished what I was teaching. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember. Elvis had left the building. I do not remember a thing. The only thing I remember was thinking, my God, what you have done for me.
Yeah.
And my mind went to the lady who crawled through the crowd to just touch his robe. Yeah. That's all she wanted to do, was just touch his robe. And her faith was such that if I could touch his robe, everything would change. Don't know who she is. Don't know her name. Mm-hmm. Don't know what happened to her afterward. Yeah. Have no idea what the rest of her life was like. Just know about that moment. And God granted me one of those moments. Mm-hmm. So do I believe that miracles happen? Yeah, they happen. It happened for me. And it's the grace of God.
I'm but overwhelmed at the moment. I'm not quite sure what to say or do. I'm sounds funny to say, at a loss for words. Thank you, Lord. He redeems my life from the pit.
Because it was really your pit experience, though, wasn't your voice, though.
Oh, true.
It was that moment on that Friday. That's just, it's
Right.
amazing to me to see how God worked in that. And you know, I mean, we think about the voice being the miracle.
Right.
The biggest miracle may very well have been that Friday afternoon as you sat in that chair.
No question. When I make the presentation myself and I talk and tell the story, I spend a long time talking about that Friday afternoon. And I make a very big point because, let me be kind. It's very easy to focus on the sensational part of all of this. It really is. I mean, that's simple. But that's not what it's about. I'm going to use a broadcast phrase. I did broadcasting for a long time, so it's easy for me in the jargon. The healing of my voice and what happened that day and what you can hear, that's the hook in my story. People want to hear that. But the point of the story happened on Friday afternoon, because every one of us is going to face, if we haven't already, something that we can't handle anymore. Life is going to get too big for us somewhere. The doctor's going to come in and say, I'm sorry, there's nothing more that we can do. You're going to get fired from a job and wonder how you're going to provide for 3 young kids and a wife, and what's going to happen to your career, and your resume doesn't read right. And those things are going to happen. Somebody's going to walk in and tell you they don't love you anymore. Every single human being on the planet at one point or another is going to face that chair. And there is an unfortunate amount of theology that's being taught publicly, big time, that somehow that chair is sin. If you wind up in that chair, you don't, A, have enough faith, B, obviously there's some sin in your life or it wouldn't have happened, and you need to repent and turn around and everything will be fine. And those theologies, all they do is strand people. They put you on an island and there's no answer. I had one old buzzard who told me at one point in time that obviously there was some sin in my life or this wouldn't have happened to me. And he suggested we sit down or kneel down and pray together, and God would forgive me and grant me a ministry of some sort. And I'll be honest with you, not only did I not want to repent of sin, I wanted to do sin to him. Okay? Don't do that to somebody. They're already so low they can't, their chin's touching the floor. Yeah. And to add guilt to what's going on, because the questions are already there. Why? I don't understand. I'm trying to do the best I can, and I thought I was serving you, Lord, and I thought I was doing this, and it's still, the rug's been pulled out from under me. And then when you add that guilt on top of someone, it's like, wow. So as I sat in that chair, and when I tell the story, I emphasize it because everybody's going to find the chair sooner or later. Yeah. And what I want you to know is that God will get you past the chair. He's not going to spare you the chair. He'll get you through the chair. Yeah. He never said we'd be spared the storm. No. He said, I'll never leave you. Yeah. You won't be there by yourself. There'll be an answer to it. When the disciples thought they were going to die in that boat out on the lake, and he came walking on the water, well, they didn't say, oh, yeah, well, there's Jesus. We knew he was coming. He said he would. They didn't recognize the answer to their prayer. Most of us don't. Yeah. More often than not, the answer shows up, and we don't even see it. We don't recognize it. And then it took Peter God bless his impetuousness, to say, I'll take a chance. I'll go see if that's really him. And, Jesus said what he always says, come.
Yeah.
And the disciples said what we always say, go. Send me a text, let me know.
Exactly.
That's where we live, guys. That's real.
Yeah.
And sitting in that chair, as painful as it was, and as much as I hate that experience, I embrace it because God became very real to me in those moments that he didn't let me do what was on my mind.
Yeah.
My wife came home from work and found me like that. And she'd never seen me like that. I'd never been like that in all of our years of marriage. And she did everything she could that afternoon to try to encourage me, remind me of all the things that God had done for us in our lifetime ministry and family and whatever. I didn't want to hear it. When you're at that spot and you're in that chair, you don't want to hear any of that. You're past that. That's great for everybody else. Doesn't work for me. That's where you are. But God's still right there. He's right there. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Doesn't matter what kind of a mood you're in. God said, I'm right there. Yeah. That's the point of my story. And then when I went Sunday and I'm talking about the pit and starting to talk about the pit, never got to talk about it. We never got back to that because God restored. When I followed up, and I called my lead physician on Monday, who was the head of otolaryngology neurology at Baylor in Houston, Baylor College of Medicine. And I went in to see him. And he took more video of my throat, which they had been taking video of my throat for 3 years. And because of what had been going on, scar tissue had grown in my throat from just the misuse of the false cords. Just one of those things that happens. It's a natural reaction to things. But the scar tissue was pretty visible on the video. My throat looked pretty rough and gnarly. And if you look at yours right now, it's pretty smooth. It's what it's supposed to look like. Well, what we did that day was we shot video of my throat, and it showed the scar tissue gone. And my throat had returned to the smooth skin that it had been previously. And my doctor, my lead physician, is Jewish. And he's very comfortable that God did this. That he's not quite comfortable yet that makes Jesus the Messiah. But that's okay. As we watched the video, and we've got tons of video of my throat, we watched it all that day. He cleared his whole schedule just for me for that day because he couldn't believe this.
Yeah.
And when it was over, he took 1,000 of the cassettes and he sent it to all of his doctor buddies all over the world to whom I'd been referred. And he said, I know we laugh at this stuff. I know we make fun of this stuff. I know we don't believe this stuff, but I was part of this one.
Wow.
That's pretty powerful.
That is
coming
very
from the
powerful.
head of that department at Baylor.
Yeah.
And that's the endorsement from him. Anyway, point being, when I called and I went to see him and he saw this and the scar tissue was gone, what became very real to me was that the point of my story is I'm an object lesson of what it means to be forgiven. And I had to go through those steps. I had to go through all of it. And I had to get to that point on Friday where I was at the end of myself. I am one of these people that is convinced that until we come to the end of ourself, we can't really commit to Jesus Christ. He's not just a trip down the aisle and sign a card. Somewhere in there is a total change. The word that is used in the New Testament is a repentance, a turning around. You have to reach the end of something to turn around. And that Friday was my turnaround. That's when it became real to me of why I was here. And it became clear over time that what God had done is simply pick me out of the crowd for his own reasons.
Yeah.
And decide to make an object lesson out of me. And say, all right, go do this, and then tell people what you did and what you went through. And don't forget to tell them that at the end, scar tissue is what the doctor was amazed by.
Yeah.
Scar tissue doesn't go away. That's what makes it scar tissue.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as you're telling your story. I'm trying to think of this like a skeptic.
Yeah.
Skeptics
Yeah.
going to say, well, look, we've all lost our voices.
Yeah.
Or, maybe this is some kind of psychosomatic thing and you're able to pull something over a couple of doctors,
Right.
whatever. But when it comes to the scar tissue, I mean, that is objective. We can see it. It was there your last visit. Now it's gone the
right.
Monday after
correct.
you experienced this miracle.
That's correct. And to this day, to my knowledge, Baylor still uses that in instruction at the college. And what the professor is doing with his medical students is saying, he doesn't get into all the theology of it, but he will show that video and he will say simply, ladies and gentlemen, just understand that as you practice medicine, there are going to be some things that will happen that you can't understand. And you're not going to have all the answers. And let me show you. And I'm thrilled to be a part of that. And I had given, obviously, the rights to all of that to Baylor to do that way before anything, never expecting anything to happen.
Yeah.
And so now the fact that it's being used in that way, that's one of those things that I think God's kind of leans back in the recliner and chuckles and says, guys, I set this up. I knew what was coming the whole time.
This whole story reminds me of the New Testament and the Gospels, where they bring the blind man, I believe it was, to
Yes.
Jesus, and who sinned, him or his father, or mother, and Jesus? No, it's for God's glory that this is going to take place. And we always think, oh wow, it's great to receive the miracle, but on the flip side of it, if you're the poor guy having to deal with the infirmity, it can be a struggle. And
No, I disagree with that.
oh really?
It is a struggle.
Yeah.
Okay, there is no vagary in it. You will have a struggle. And remember, when the blind man was asked who did this, he just had a simple answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't care. Here's the deal. I was blind and now I can see.
That's right.
And I look at that and I laugh and I say, yep, bud, that's it. I have been asked a million times, Duane has, do you believe in the miracles? Did God do this? My doctors, when they were interviewed at one point in time, did God do this? Is there some reason this happened? And I remember my lead physician responding with a smile. Guys, medical science can do a lot of things. Here's the deal. He can speak, and he can speak clearly. And I thought of the scripture when he said that.
Yeah, very, very good. Now, how many doctors did you see?
Well, I saw teams of doctors. One of the things that I did not know until I got into all of this is that it is not unusual for top flight physicians in specialties to operate with teams around them, also physicians, and also specialized in particular areas of their specialties. For instance, my lead physician was the head of otolaryngology, which is a specialty, neurology, which is a specialty, and they put the two together, and he was otolaryngology neurology. So the only thing he was, where his specialty was the neurology of the vocal system.
Oh, wow.
That was his deal. And then around that, then we had all kinds of otolaryngologists, oncologists. I saw 63 lead doctors from all over the world, but every one of them had teams. So if you put their teams with them, I saw over 200 physicians, and they were from everywhere. I guess my favorite story is there was one otolaryngologist from Japan, from Tokyo, who had developed a particular technique for people who had a condition that was similar to mine, but not the same, and I'll explain the difference if you'd like. But he flew from Tokyo to Houston to examine me, to see if I was a candidate for his procedure. And he examined me and then got back on the same JAL plane when it turned around and flew back to Tokyo. But I was a guinea pig. And when you're in this condition, You be the guinea pig. It's no problem, whatever. But I know there were doctors from all over Europe. He was from Japan. I know there were some Chinese doctors that had been consulted. I know that they went to a symposium, and my lead team took the videos that they had and played them at the symposium so that they could discuss it to see if he could come home with any ideas. It was a matter of discussion. The reason for it was generally when the condition that I seemed to have occurs, there is paralysis. One or both of the vocal cords becomes rigid, paralyzed.
Okay.
Mine went limp. You can treat the paralysis with Botox because you can get it to relax. When it goes limp, that's what they couldn't treat. There's no treatment for that. And that's what everybody wanted to see. They know what paralysis is. It's not common, but it's not unusual. But the going limp, that never happens.
Never seen that.
That never happens. At one point, one of the doctors used the illustration. He said, "You're 1 in a million of 1 in a million."
Oh, wow.
And thank you very much. But it was because of that I saw the doctors. It wasn't because of me. I'm not important. I'm not somebody. I couldn't afford it. Nobody paid for it. I was there because I was the guinea pig.
Gotcha.
I was there because I was the challenge. I was there because they couldn't figure out how do you do this. And as far as putting something over on the doctors, that's laughable. Forgive me, but when I have been challenged, and I have, with that, it's a joke because they're doing videotape.
Yeah.
And they've got a scope up my nose and down my throat, and I can't control what they're seeing down there. It is what it is. And there have been so many of them, and they did it to the point that I didn't even have to be anesthetized for them to do it. I could just go ahead and do it, guys. It's okay.
That's amazing in and of itself. So you lost your voice after you contracted the flu. Now, was this like a special strand of the flu, or?
Now, that's the thing that was interesting, I guess, is as good a word as any. When I got the flu, it was just a flu virus. I was pastoring in Brenham, Texas, and I had 2 services on Sunday morning. And that particular Sunday, I had planned to sort of preach, sing my message. I started in music when I was 16 years old. That was the beginning of my ministry. So I was singing songs a long time before I was preaching sermons. And every now and then, I'll take a song and I'll take an outline and put it together and sort of preach, sing the message. And that's what I was going to do that morning. Well, when I woke up, I had a horribly sore throat. It was just like someone had taken a match and put it in my throat. That's all. Just a bad sore throat. And I went to service 8:30, did this thing the way I had planned it. Didn't sound good, didn't feel good. 11 o'clock, I just tried to get through it. And by Sunday night, I had a fever that was so high, I really couldn't do it at all. And I had a wonderful deacon who came and said, "Preacher, go home and go to bed. I'll handle it." And he did, and he took care of Sunday night. And I went to bed, and it's just typical flu symptoms and all the nausea and everything else that goes with it. I called the next morning to a friend of mine in Houston who's a specialist and asked if he would see me. He told me he would. He is the one who diagnosed it. He said, "Well, you got flu." And went home, and he said, "There are 2 things, with the flu. If you come and see me and take the medication that I tell you, you'll be over it in about 7 days. And if you don't do any of that, it takes about a week." So, being from A&M, I get that and knew what to do with that. But seriously, I took meds that he told me, but he said, "Duane, it's going to be a week." He said, "Go home, go to bed. Just stay there." And I did. I was good. I did what he said. I've been involved in preaching, singing, being in front of public, and needing to do presentations. I've done that so long that I know if you don't take care of the instrument, you can't do what you need to do. So when I'm told stop, I'll stop and regroup. So I did. I did what he told me. When I came back to him at the end of 10 days by the time I got back to him, the sore throat was gone. And the infection that he had found in my bronchi and that he'd given me medication for, when he did the test, it was gone. that's when the pressure started. All the soreness was gone, all the pain was gone, but I had this hand on my throat, and that's where it began. Wow. And that's when my friend is the one who sent me to Baylor. And he said, Duane, I think I know what's going on, general terms, but he said, I want you to see some specialists. And he had an inside track with them, and very candidly, not everyone who calls gets to see them, but he described my symptoms, and that's when the term guinea pig came to the front. And when they agreed to take me as a patient, I picked up a team of 13 specialists there at Baylor. Wow. That were my lead team, and then everybody else spun around them, and they became the repository for all of the medical documentation and everything else that we did.
Wow, that's amazing. So at this point, it's safe to say that in no way, shape, or form this could be psychosomatic, because what they started to observe then at this point, what exactly did they see when they were looking at your throat early on?
Well, the first thing, let's back up a half a step from that, if I may. First thing, one of the things they do with flu is they culture it. And one of the first things they do with the infection, bronchial infections, they culture it to make sure that that's what you have, so they know what to prescribe. Sure. So we have not my thoughts. We have these nasty cultures. Here's what it is. So they have those. And then the first thing they saw in my throat was that it was swollen almost completely shut. Well, when you get the flu, when you get laryngitis, the only thing laryngitis is your throat swells. And your vocal cords, which are down low, can't get together because your throat is swollen, and the false cords, which are little pieces of fat, up higher, the swelling in your throat starts beating them together. Well, my throat was so swollen that my doctor looked at me and said, wow, Duane, he said, I'm amazed you can even get a breath. And I couldn't eat at that point. I couldn't get it down. And so they put me on steroids to reduce swelling. Again, typical treatment, nothing special. Put me on antibiotics for the bronchial infection that I had. Typical treatment for that. Nothing extraordinary. And for the first 10 days or so of the experience, it was nothing but ordinary, you've had it, I've had it, flu. That was it. But it was from there that everything else sprung.
Gotcha. So as time progressed, and now this lasted 3 years from the time that you first lost your voice until God
to the very weekend.
Really?
It was the third weekend in January of 1990 that I lost it. It was the third weekend in January of 1993 that God gave it back.
Wow. Isn't that amazing?
When I get to heaven, if it still matters, I'm going to ask him, what was that about?
Well, I think he likes the number 3.
Somewhere in there.
There might have been another miracle associated with 3.
Wouldn't be surprised.
I just did that to be funny. So over time, though, did it plateau out, or was it just progressively getting worse?
It was progressively getting worse because what was happening, those little pieces of fat in your throat, the false cords, they're not designed to sustain speech. When you get laryngitis, you can fake it for a day or two, okay? That's laryngitis. But I could not, that's the only way I could make sound. That's all I had to make sound, were those false cords. And they're not designed for that. So I abused them. You know what an abrasion is when you fall and skin your knee?
Yeah.
All right. That's what both sides of my throat looked like within days.
Oh, wow.
I abraded them. Well, that added to the soreness, of course, because there it is. That makes sense. That follows. And it was in those abrasions then that the scar tissue formed.
Oh, okay.
And the scar tissue was overtaking the fatty tissue, which were the false cords. The only problem with that is that that scar tissue didn't have nerve endings in it, so that when I needed to bring them together to make sound, scar tissue doesn't respond. It's just scar tissue. And since it was completely taking over those false cords, I was losing the ability to speak.
Wow.
And they had told me, this was in 1990, that I lost it. And when I was going through it with the doctors, they told me that probably by 1994, I wouldn't even be able to make a squeak.
Wow.
That it would be completely, and I would be mute, totally so. So was it getting worse? The condition itself, no. But the ancillary parts of it, yes.
Yeah. It's amazing. So let's so we know this can't be psychosomatic. We're looking at the objective evidence of the scar tissue on your throat. But I want to come back to the spiritual side for a moment, because I know that there are some out there who would say, well, you must have had this extreme amount of faith, or if you have enough faith, you could have just spoke this miracle into existence. What would you say to somebody who threw that out there?
Well, first of all, I would put my arm around them and hug them very, very tight. And I would say, okay, let me help you here. Mm-hmm. We serve God. He does not serve us. Mm. He's not Santa Claus. He's not my bellboy. Yeah. I can't put 25 cents worth of faith in a vending machine and pull the handle and have my miracle come out the bottom. God is not the vending machine. That is not how it works. Never has, never will. The responsibility is on the sovereign grace of God, not upon my ability to manipulate him. Mm-hmm. God is not manipulatable. Is that a word? It is now. He's God. Yeah. As I have said, there are times when I would like to tell God to get in a box and behave himself so that I could understand him. But I can't. He's God. The problem that most of us have is we want to put God in terms that we understand. And if I have enough faith, then God owes me. Mm. And very honestly, I don't need Jesus to die on the cross if I can manipulate God, because then I can be good enough to get to heaven on my own. It's the same theology. It plays out differently. It has different characteristics. But at its heart, I'm telling God I'm good enough. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is, as I said, when you hit the chair, you realize it's time to turn around. I've gone as far as I can go. And until you get to the point that I can't do anything else, God will let you do whatever you want to do.
Wow.
And then when you get there, he says, I've been here all the time.
That's amazing.
Right here.
That's right. Absolutely. So obviously you're on the receiving end of the miracle, but you'd come to a place of resignation to where it just doesn't look like it's going to happen for me. What would you say to those people who are praying for a miracle and they never get it?
That was much to my mother's consternation, by the way. Mama always prays for you. You know that. Yes. And Mama's convinced that you're going to get your miracle no matter what. Yeah. All right. And that's Mama's job. And my mom was right there. She was. To the point that I had to say to her at one point, Mom, please don't say it to me anymore. Yeah. Because it's not comforting to me. Mm-hmm. I've resolved this. I am what I am. I don't understand why God has put me in this place. I don't know. But I will accept what he has for me, and I will move forward. If you were to ask each of the apostles that went to do their missionary work in various parts of the world after Jesus was resurrected and ascended, why were they crucified upside down? Why did God allow that? Why didn't he send the chariot that he sent for Elijah? After all, they were the apostles and they walked with Jesus, for heaven's sake. Why did Paul wind up in a prison? Why did he have a thorn in the flesh that God wouldn't remove? We can ask why until we're blue in the face. But there is a point at which you say, you know what, God, I get it. You're God. So what I would say to someone who is praying for a miracle and it hasn't happened, as long as you have breath, you have hope. That's one. I don't know what God's going to do in your next breath. I didn't know what God was going to do in my last breath. I had no idea. And he has a purpose. That's the other thing. God doesn't do things capriciously. He doesn't do them just because it's Thursday. He has a purpose in the things that he does. And what his purpose is in your life, no idea. It may be that there's a miracle in your future. It also may be that someone will gain strength by watching you in prison.
Wow.
I have no clue what God is going to do. But here's what I know. One day, We're going to be with him face to face. And then all those questions that you have, if it still matters, you can ask him.
Thank you so much, Duane. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate your desire. It's not even fair, I think, to even say desire, but your determination to not allow this to get sensationalized and to give God the honor and glory. And I appreciate that so much, and your willingness to tell us so much of the story of your true pit experience as you suffered through the loss of your voice, and then the appreciation to God that you've shown in His sovereignty through all this. So, Duane, thank you so much.
You're
really
very
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Duane.
So the psalmist says, I'm excited. Bless the Lord, O my soul. One of his benefits is he heals all of my diseases. And in verse 4 he says, and he redeems my life from the pit. Now I like that verse just a whole lot. I have had, and you have had in times past, pit experiences. We've all had times when our life seemed to be in a pit, in a grave. And we didn't have an answer for the pit we find ourselves in. And I don't understand this right now. I'm a bit overwhelmed at the moment. I'm not quite sure what to say or do. I'm sounds funny to say, at a loss for words. Thank you, Lord. He redeems my life from the pit.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Apologetics Profile, a production of Watchman Fellowship Incorporated, Arlington, Texas. For more information about apologetics, visit watchman.org today.